So in September 2017, I made a very official sounding statement. And it literally read, "I'm so excited to announce that I'm going to be one of 18 candidates battling it out for Lord Sugar's £250,000 business investment on this year's Apprentice." And this announcement was so big to me that I literally copied and pasted it onto every single platform where I had any kind of digital footprint, literally just to tell everybody that I was having a huge moment in my life. But what if I told you that my first day and a Saturday job at the age of 16 was just as significant as the first day that I entered the Apprentice boardroom? What if I told you that being one of 5 in a training group and my first graduate job after university was just as significant as being in Lord Sugar's final 5 at the interview stage of the process? If I was to judge it by social media standards, the Apprentice definitely wins in terms of the amount of interaction, excitement, and likes and comments and congratulations from everybody. But it's actually quite interesting because one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from the book, the global bestseller, The Alchemist. And it reads, "The simple things are the most extraordinary, but only the wise can see them." And with that said, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my story and journey. So I was born in Gambia in West Africa, and it's literally one of the smallest countries in Africa, just next to Senegal. And I moved to the UK at the age of 6, just me and my mum. And for anybody in the room who's grown up with a single mother, it's not necessarily always the most kind of straightforward or easy of lifestyles. And particularly for me at a very early age, having to navigate, moving cultures that were completely different, moving from Gambia all the way to the UK, and not necessarily with a huge support system of family around. But that early upbringing and that early change to my lifestyle at the age of 6 actually inspired me by watching my mum, show me an example of great work ethic and also resilience. And from that stage, straight away, I knew that I wanted to make something of myself, to make my mum proud and also my family back in Gambia proud, who didn't necessarily have the opportunities that had been all of a sudden presented to me through education and work. So as soon as I could, at the age of 16, I got a job at a local clothing shop in the local high street in Wakefield, where I grew up. And this particular clothing store was actually owned by 2 brothers. And I don't think that these 2 brothers were necessarily in this business because they were passionate about women's wear. I think it was just, a profitable kind of business venture for them. But I absolutely loved this job because I naturally love clothes and fashion. So I used to really, get stuck in and be really invested in my role. And in particular, I used to enjoy changing the mannequins and making the outfits in the shop window. And quite quickly, actually, Saturdays became the kind of designated mannequin changing days. And my bosses actually saw a difference in terms of the level of footfall that we're getting in the shops because of my, creativity in the outfits that I was creating. And not long after that, I was kind of given, a mini promotion, even though I was being paid £3.70 an hour. Every month, at least one Sunday, we would go buying in the wholesalers in Manchester, and they'd take me with them. So it was basically my job to advise on, based on the customers that I usually chat to, what kind of outfits they would most likely to buy. And without knowing it, actually, at the age of 16, I was given creative control of a very important part of this small business, and that was the stock. So from there, I carried on kind of working in small part-time jobs for bigger brands and companies, a couple of shoe brands and clothes brands. But I was going through college, but I still had this mindset where I thought, I really want to make something of myself, and I want a very stable career that I could kind of go back to Africa and say, I'm now this, insert title. So I thought it's so important to me to be the first person in my family to go to a UK university. I need to make sure that I get in and I stand out from the crowd in my application. So I thought, what can I do to make that happen? So I was looking at extracurricular courses that I could kind of get stuck into, and I came across a sign language course, and I thought, that's interesting. You know, if you read my application, I could do sign language. That's a bit different. So I signed up to a deaf awareness course at the time. So I did the deaf awareness, then I started level 1, and just when I was about to start level 2 in British Sign Language, I thought, actually, sign language interpreter, that's quite cool. Maybe I want to be a sign language interpreter. But I thought, not just any sign language interpreter. I want to be the little lady at the side of the TV in the corner. But I'm going to make it look really different. I'm going to wear all these fancy pencil dresses, and it's going to be like, you know, something no one's ever seen before. But by the time I'd finished college, and I'd done very kind of traditional subjects, so I did English literature, geography, and government and politics, I thought, oh, I don't know whether sign language is necessarily the career that I want to do, actually. So I was quite flaky at this age. So I thought, I actually enjoy my government and politics A-level, so maybe I'll do politics. So I ended up going to Newcastle University and studying politics. And I loved the subject at the time, studying it, still love the subject now, but I thought, do I really want to be a civil servant? Nah, doesn't really sound that glam either. So I kind of cast the net out wide, and I thought, let me start kind of applying for graduate schemes in more, you know, corporate environments, really cool companies. And I actually started hearing back for interviews with these graduate schemes, and naturally, me being me again, I was really excited to get dressed up for these interviews. And at the time, whenever I had some spare moments, I would binge watch the series Suits, and I would look at Rachel Zane, who was the character that Meghan Markle used to play, and I had in my mind that I wanted to look like Rachel Zane at the time, and without even knowing it again, personal branding was very important to me. But when I went shopping in the high street, I'd walk into a department store, and there would literally be a designated workwear rail at the back of the store, very much neglected. I would try the clothes on, and they'd be very frumpy. And I just thought, what is this? Like, why isn't there anything that's available for the type of, you know, clothing that I actually want to wear for work? So I literally had a light bulb moment at that time, and I said to myself, wouldn't it be good if somebody set up a one-stop shop for young women where they could go online and get either their interview clothing or their full work wardrobe when they start working in corporate environments that was both affordable but also didn't compromise on style? Because all of the other shops that I went to that actually made me look like I was fresh out of the Suits cast were completely out of my price range. So I thought, I don't know when it's going to be, but I would love to work for myself. I would love to start my own business. So in the future, when I do, that is going to be the business that I set up. But I kind of still felt like I needed a bit more kind of maturity and experience of working. So I carried on with my grad scheme interviews, and I actually ended up working for a team that was on behalf of Google, looking after digital agencies across the UK and Ireland. And my team's job was basically to grow the digital agencies' revenue with their clients in terms of the Google AdWords that they were supplying. And in my team, we actually used to look after a very unique agency called Climb Online. And if anybody has watched The Apprentice in previous years, Climb Online was the winning business by Mark Wright a couple of years ago. And I'd kind of overheard in the office that there was an event that my colleague had got invited to called An Evening with Lord Sugar. So I thought, oh God, An Evening with Lord Sugar, I really want to go to that. And it just so happened that I had some meetings with my own agencies in London around that area. So very last minute, I snapped up a ticket and went with my colleagues to the event. We all sat in the back row. We weren't really supposed to be getting that much involved. We were just supposed to be there to kind of represent the company. And they opened up a Q&A to Lord Sugar, and they said, right, last question, who wants to ask Lord Sugar a question? And I was obviously supposed to sit there just silent. And without even thinking, my hand just shot up in the air, and I thought, when am I ever going to get the chance to have a conversation with Lord Sugar? Just ask the question. So I took the mic and I said, Lord Sugar, if someone from the millennial generation, particularly the younger side of the millennial generation, wanted to pitch to a more mature investor, i.e. yourself, aside from a very well-structured business plan, what would you need to convince you to invest in an idea that you may not necessarily naturally resonate with? And he kind of paused and he said, I think I'd need a translator. And everybody laughed. He said, I think I'd need somebody to translate it into Cockney rhyming slang. All you young people and all your jargon, I just want to know what is it and how does it make me money? Just keep it simple. So I was really pleased with myself at this point. Again, another highlight that I could put on social media. My colleague had thankfully videoed it, so I was like, oh, I got to ask Lord Sugar a question, big deal. And everybody was commenting saying, oh, Joanna, you should apply, whatever. I didn't think anything of it. Obviously, I was 21 at the time. No, I was 22 at the time. But when I got back to the office on Monday, I worked in a very male-dominated environment. So there was quite a lot of bants. And people were basically saying, oh, you're going to ask Lord Sugar another question about millennials and all of this, and kind of taking the mick out of me. It just went over my head. But they actually said to one of my colleagues who was at the event but didn't use the initiative to, ask Lord Sugar a question, they said, oh, you should apply. I bet Mark would give you a few tips, on the process. You'd be so good on the Apprentice. And me being me, I kind of swiveled back in my chair and said, well, if you're going to apply, I'll apply, and we'll do a little competition and see who gets furthest within the interview process. And before I knew it, I was basically sat in a long table in my first brainstorming session in the first episode in the Burgers task. And I had a little moment that I'll never forget from that first task, where I looked around and there was one person who had £3 million turnover in their business. We had another person who had been running their business for over 10 years. I had just turned 23. And I thought, what have I just got myself in for? And, I was the youngest candidate in the series. So it took a little bit of time to kind of gain the respect of my fellow candidates and Lord Sugar, Karen and Claude, to really prove that I deserved to be there. And actually, I started off being probably the most underestimated candidate, or one of the most underestimated candidates of my series, but I actually ended up with statistically the best record of the series. So I ended up winning 8 out of 10 tasks and was the only twice winning project manager overall. And after you've been through a process like The Apprentice, it's a bit of a whirlwind, especially for me. I never kind of expected that I would, the first time that I applied, that literally came from office banter, that I would be sat in front of Lord Sugar. I've had to kind of take a moment to kind of reflect on, what I've learned in such a short space of time, and, what it's meant throughout my journey and where I want to go in the future. And when I was thinking about the moments in my life that have really made an impact, it made me think about a presentation that I used to do on behalf of Google called Micro Moments. So from Google's perspective, micro moments, we're talking about the mobile revolution and how the small sessions that we have with our mobile phones can actually be the most impactful in terms of converting a sale if somebody is advertising to you through Google. So it's kind of saying, don't neglect the small sessions that people have online, basically. So I started thinking about my own micro moments, and on reflection, I'm thinking, well, at the age of 16, technically I was a fashion business influencer through the buying that I was doing with these two men who owned this business. When I was in university, I stumbled across the business plan that would basically near enough change my life just through, thinking about what I was going to wear for interviews. And I think even, the little debating modules that I had in my politics degree, even that probably got me ready to kind of take on Lord Sugar when we got to that boardroom, or take on anybody else who was about to get fired. I think in a world of social media where we kind of concentrate on the big news, the highlights, the next big thing, what big things are people achieving that they can kind of brag about through statuses. Sometimes we kind of neglect the small moments that really prepare us for the big moments in our lives. And these moments can actually be the most significant, in my opinion. So what I would really like everybody to do from this talk is to go away and not necessarily just think and list the micro moments in their lives, which sometimes can actually be disguised as moments that you wouldn't want to brag about, moments of hardship that are really character building, to really appreciate them, to know that these are the micro moments that kind of join up to make us the people that we are today. And as the quote that I mentioned before from The Alchemist says, the simple things are the most extraordinary. So I would encourage you to recognize that your micro moments can also be as extraordinary. Thank you.